Robert, welcome to the show. Excited to have you on and appreciate your time today.
Hey, Brian, it's wonderful to be with you and wonderful to be reminded of my many experiences in Chicago over the years.
Yes, we were chatting about that a little bit offline. I was joking that the Windy City here is living up to its name, which is windy, rainy, and no sun. So it's par for the course in December time. But the rest of the year is wonderful, right?
And
Well,
it's rich. It's rich in architecture. It's rich in culture. It's rich in education. There's just a lot of positive things about Chicago.
I agree 1,000,000%. Robert, we were talking a little bit offline about the mission of the show, which is to inspire and educate 1 million people to get out of the job that they feel stuck in and start the business of their dreams, or just do something different, something they were meant to do. And we were talking a little bit offline about how most of us are, or at least I was stuck for so long because top reasons. I refused to ask for help. I had a big ego. I stuffed a lot of stuff down. I know you have a lot of experience with this, and we just really want to get to the root of why people are stuck, and with the thousands of people that you've worked with over the years, what are some of the commonalities of why people are stuck or feel stuck and feel like they have to stay there? If you could shed some light on that, I'd be grateful.
Well, anything I can share, I do so willingly. I do not have exactly the same experience as you and perhaps many of your listeners in terms of working for the big corporation. I did in my early 20s work for a big financial services company, and I got promoted pretty quickly, and so I was a branch manager in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, not too far from you. And I had the best numbers out of 32 branch offices, and I was only 24 years old. And I went to my boss, who was a group supervisor, and said, "Well, what's my path to get basically getting your job?" And to shorten all of this, he basically said, "You're too young. It will never happen." Now, I think versions of that happen for many people over the years and talking with people. And perhaps a good way to start this for me would be to share a story, a real story. I think most people are familiar with Tony Robbins, incredibly successful motivational speaker, trainer, a friend of mine, I'm happy to say. And but years ago, Tony was not in good shape. So now I'm going to detour a little bit. I mean, he had sold franchises for his work. He hadn't done his homework, and all 7 franchises were suing him. So that's a little background piece. Even though he's, this incredible stage presence, incredible content, incredible personality, just a good guy and a very talented one. But he had made that business mistake. And I think a lot of people have made mistakes around franchising. And so at the same time, I was on the board of directors of an organization called WinStar, a nonprofit founded by the late John Denver and committed to creating a sustainable future. And part of my role on that was creating and then leading what was called the WinStar Connection. There was one in Chicago. There were over 40 of them around the world, local groups committed to a sustainable future. And they each had different projects. They were each independent 501c3s.
Mm-hmm.
And the big deal in WinStar was our yearly meeting in Aspen in the music tent with 1,800 people, some great speakers, and sold out every year, and just a meeting of the tribe. And so one year I decided that, hey, all of these people that are running the WinStar Connection groups are going to be coming for that event. I wonder how many of them would show up a few days early, and I'll do a pro bono leadership training for them. And so I did that. My staff, by the way, was my then 12-year-old son. So it was an interesting adventure. And
Yeah.
one of the things, if you're leading a high impact seminar, is the importance of a break. You're confronting people about who they are and what they want to create in their lives. And it's an energy drain. So your breaks are important. And in this particular hotel, which was up against Aspen Mountain, they had a deck overlooking the ski runs. And that was my escape place. We didn't have a green room. It wasn't very fancy. And so I'm on day 2 of this 3-day program. And I'm really hot and heavy into it. And I really need a break. And I'm headed for that exit onto that deck, my hidden place where I can drink a cup of tea and breathe. Mm-hmm. And this guy gets in my face and stops me. And he says, my name is Sam. I said, great, welcome. He said, I'm running the connection group in Cleveland. I said, that's great. And I'm trying to get past him. I'm just trying to escape. And he said, it's so satisfying. It's so wonderful. I just love doing it. I said, Sam, thank you for being here. Thank you for your contribution. And I'm still trying to push past him. And he says, I'm also a lawyer. That's my full-time gig. I said, great. He said, no, it's not great. It's terrible. And I want to get out of it. And I said something kind of rude at the time that I learned it was really a valuable learning for me about a piece of knowledge that I have and that I can share and that has value to people. Because what I said to Sam, kind of rudely, was just quit. Now, I'm saying this at that time. I'm living in a 14,500 square foot home. I've got my own jet. I'm mostly retired at 46 years old. And I'm raising some great kids and skiing 80 days a year and traveling the world and stuff like that. And yet I'm saying to this guy, just quit. And he responded with his script. And by that, I mean, I could tell when he said it that he had said it to many different people, but beginning with himself. And he starts telling me about, well, I'm a partner in the firm and it's hard to unwind. And my wife isn't supportive of this and blah, 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 blah. And I said, again, remember, my goal is to get outside and take a break. I said, Sam, I don't have much time right now, but what I want to share with you is that I've heard that story from thousands of people and it never works. You're not going to start something new until you quit. And but I didn't think of it as some profound moment. I just was trying to deal with the guy and get past him. Yeah. 2 years later, my wife and I were actually living not in our home. We were remodeling our home so extensively that we couldn't live in it. And so we had bought this other little house to live in temporarily. And this is back in the landline days. And somehow my phone rings. And, my assistant and a couple of other people knew that phone number, but no one else. The phone rings and I answer and I said, who's this? And he says, this is Sam. And it was that guy. And he goes on to tell me that after that seminar that I conducted, it kind of opened him up to those kinds of ideas, growth ideas, personal development ideas. And he went off and did the Tony Robbins 3-day program, Personal Power, or something. I think it's called that, Personal Power, at that time. And but he bought the expensive ticket, where you get to meet Tony and have a picture taken with him and so on. And when he did that, he told Tony that he was the lawyer and that he wanted to quit, and found out about the 7 lawsuits from the franchisee. And Tony was really struggling. He was pouring his personal income back into the company, stuff like that. And so somehow they made a deal where he became the kind of a part-time internal, I'm trying to think of what that's called, but corporate counsel, and managed the 7 lawsuits and got them all settled and got it all behind him, successfully. I mean, Tony's a good guy. He just made a bad deal with 7 people, and they all loved him, but they sued him because it was not what they signed up for. So that got made, and then Sam Georges became Tony Robbins' CEO for 22 years. he, which is, I mean, he's working for the company, but Tony was generous in terms of ownership. He was like an entrepreneur. He was on his own. He was doing what he loved in an area he loved. Um, and so I share that story because I think the biggest thing that I've learned, I mean, I know a lot about what's under it, but ultimately the action is just quit. You're not going to, whatever you are headed for, whatever you're yearning. There's an organization there in Chicago, by the way, called the Wright Education University or something like that. Bob Wright, Wright.
Mm-hmm.
He's my coach, full self disclosure here. But he and his wife have this incredible series that they do on your yearning. What is it that speaks to you in that quiet moments? That kind of doesn't go away, and you might try to avoid it, but it's what you really want to do with your life. So does any of that make sense, Brian?
Oh my goodness, so much of it. Number one, the fact that you still have a coach to this day is super awesome. I'll ask you to expand on that here in a bit, because I think it's very important and something that I avoided for decades. And that's why I stayed where I was for so long, was because I refused to invest in myself. And as a result of that, I stayed in the same spot, stuck, and it just, like the anger and the resentment and everything just built up and up. But I didn't realize it was happening because I stuffed it down. I listened to a recent interview that you gave where you talked about that. You talked about, blame, shame of fear of success, and stuffing it down, like not dealing with maybe our past or the real issues that we're having, so that we can, as you say, just quit. So maybe if you could expand on that a little bit, Robert. This is great stuff so far.
Well, the bottom line on all of this is our belief systems. And the research says that we're normally unaware of somewhere around 90% of our beliefs, but we operate from them. And I generally don't like mechanical metaphors, but the one that kind of works is the computer metaphor, which is we have an operating system. I mean, we have programs, we're pretty aware of those and how to use them. Mm-hmm. Our personality, our ability to communicate, our thinking, conscious thinking, our feelings, those are the programs that we operate from. But under that is an operating system, and that's our belief system. Most of it, according to the research, is pretty much in place by the time we're 8 years old. And then what happens with any belief is that we go looking for evidence that we're right about it. Now, I'm getting into the weeds a little bit here intellectually, but
I like it.
I'll give you an example. That something that happened for me recently is I was in a supermarket, and I'm a terrible shopper. But I'm there, you got to eat, and yeah. I'm there. And I turned around to one of those end caps, and here's the scene is a woman with 3 children, I would guess all under the age of 6. And, most women, most moms, they don't get a babysitter to go to the supermarket, and the kids hate the supermarket. I think a few supermarkets are doing a better job of putting a healthy snack at the entrance for the kid, or a little toy for them to play with. But most of them, it's just miserable for mom. And this was a scene of miserable for mom. And the middle child, who I'm going to guess was about 2.5 years old, was just throwing a fit. And he's angry, and he's shouting, and he's crying, and he's tearing stuff off the shelves in frustration, whatever. Kids don't want to be trapped in a supermarket, right? Mm-hmm. And without mom's attention, mom is paying attention to getting the shopping done. And I'm making all this up, but I think it's mostly true. I mean, I'm making up what I saw. And this little boy threw himself on the floor of the supermarket and doing his little rage attack and screaming. And she reached down, grabbed him by the arm, picked him up by the arm. You know, you do that with a small child, and maybe not very safe, but I may have done that in my past. That's possible. And she smacked him on the butt. So, and he quieted down after that. That one little tap did it, you know. He's not being abused, he's not being hurt. It did it. The point of sharing the story is this, and for your listeners, for you, for me, how do we react when we see something like that? Because that reaction takes place in no time. The reaction is so instant, and it's 100% belief based. And then we've gone looking for evidence that we're right about that belief. So I've shared this with larger groups or similar stories with larger groups, and you hear people say, well, a child should never be hit. I'm going to confront mom. That's one of the responses. One response, by the way, the most popular response, you say nothing and do nothing, you disappear. You don't go down that aisle. You completely avoid dealing with it because it's so uncomfortable for you. And, you know, you can kind of guess what the underlying belief is that caused that instant reaction. Or you have the reaction that she should hit him 2 or 3 more times because kids need that kind of discipline, you know. So there's all these different reactions to a relatively simple picture, an event, and they're all belief-based. You react instantly based upon your belief about child raising, about what happens in public, all of those things. And by the way, a popular response when you do this with groups is, well, I would go counsel with the mother about the way she's handling it. And, you know, I have 2 adopted special needs kids, so I've had a lot of, I guess, special training in that field. And I promise you, that's the worst thing you can do. Now, you can go over and help pick up the stuff off the floor. And you can say comforting things to mom. You don't confront her about her parenting. You know, it's just never, that will not turn out well. But the point is that we have all these events in our lives that we react to, and including thinking about leaving a job. Like Sam George's, most of us create a story about we can or cannot do something. And we tell that story convincingly, and we believe it. Quite often, it has little connection to reality because so much more is possible. I mean, Brian, you're an example of it, but there are many examples of it. And so the big thing, I believe, is to really put yourself in a personal growth space where you can start examining your beliefs and your barriers, those things that you have put into your story about why you're not acting.
Yeah.
But, you know, the thing we know, I mean, I don't want to sound like some kind of guru that wears a tie occasionally, but it's all about choice, and we are not going to live forever. I mean, those are just words. That's a really easy thing to fall off my lips here. But it's all a choice, a series of choices. That's what life is. And we are not going to live forever. We're not going to get back even one day. So if you've got that yearning, if you've got that suspicion that you're not in the right place, that thing that kind of nags at you, and you're noticing that maybe your alcohol consumption is going up a little bit, or maybe even legal or illegal opiates, or you're not sleeping well, you're frustrated all the time, you're feeling like a victim. You know, there are signals where you go, hey, I need to do some work here on me. And that's where like going to the Right Institute for their training programs, or getting a coach, reading in a different area around the development of the self and the psychology of the self. There's a lot of good stuff on YouTube. I mean, there's a lot of junk on YouTube, but there's a lot of good stuff. The Brene Brown's little 18 minutes on vulnerability is something I recommend to executives because that's an important part of leadership development. And by the way, that video has over 55 million views. This academic, Brene Brown, a short talk, 18 minutes, 55 million views. It's just her talking. There's no laser show, no music, no graphics, just her. But it's so powerful. And also, I don't think 55 million people watched it. I think they're like me. I've watched it like 5 times.
5 times, yeah, because you're so much.
First of all, she's so entertaining. But secondly, that's a message I needed to hear, to be more vulnerable, to be more open. And but there are a lot of things that we can do around because what stops us is us. And so we got to do some work on us if we want to make a shift, or if we want to look at it, at least give it a fair hearing. Telling your story on why you can't leave that job it's like unfair to you and everybody around you, because you're making them miserable too, usually. And so, you got to dig in and do a little examination of you and how you think and the stories you tell yourself and your doubts, your fears, those things from the past that you mentioned, blame, shame, regret, guilt, and even past success can stop you from what's next for you. But the number of stories of people that have made mid-career changes in their life are legion. Go find them. That's useful to counteract any negativity that you're carrying within you.
Amazing. I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but you just said something that really resonates with me. And I would like for you, if you have an example, I'm sure you do, past success can stop you. What do you mean by that?
My hero, I work as a mentor to executives, kind of like a little bit different. And my hero in that field is Marshall Goldsmith. I believe he is a preeminent thinker in the field of coaching. And by the way, you can get a lot of his material free online. You go to his website and there's all kinds of free stuff there that's really valuable. So Marshall wrote my favorite book in the coaching field, which is What Got You Here Will Not Get You There. What got you here will not get you there, because everything is changing so fast that whatever skill set, attitude, habit, and behavior that had brought you some kind of success it's not valid anymore. Or it's certainly not going to be valid in 5 years. And an example of that would be working with young people. It is so radically different today to hire a 22, 25-year-old bright young man or woman and hope to be a good leader, a good manager and a good leader of them, because they are so different. It's so different as to be, this is bar talk. Everybody complaining about millennials and all of that kind of stuff. What a waste of time and energy to complain about it. You got to deal with it. And to deal with it, you have to be different. So what got you here won't get you there. If you're hanging out, if your story is about your past success, the classic is the high school quarterback, that is reliving his days of glory 10 and 20 years later.
Yeah.
And I do have stories about that. But whatever has happened in your past can often be like a dead weight, both in terms of disappointments, failures, again, that blame, shame, regret, guilt stuff, but also past success. You cannot change it. It's the past. It's time to make new choices. And to the degree that those choices are influenced by your past, they will probably not be the best choices.
Oh, that's
Uh, we,
great. I'm so glad we went there. I was afraid of actually succeeding. That was what I uncovered when I went to, I've shared this many times on the show. I've been seeing a counselor. I have coaches. I also see a counselor for the last 5 years and one of the first things we did was talk about my childhood, like go as far
yeah,
back as you can, and the downloads and how do you feel about this. And not that I had a bad childhood, but a lot of my operating system, as you so eloquently put, that's when you said by 8 years old. He literally said the same exact thing. Our beliefs are embedded when by the time we're 8 years old. So I'm glad you shared that. I'm curious, Robert, and I think that maybe several of the listeners might be, how does a guy why does a guy who has his own jet and retired at 46 still have mentors and coaches?
uh, look, one way to talk about this is the true confessions part, to tell you all the mistakes I've made
Oh,
and the barriers I've put up to success. I will share that during that period of time, I lived in Aspen for 12 years, and I don't regret one moment of it. I raised some great kids, had a lot of fun. The skiing, the hiking, the relationship with John Denver, just so much of it was wonderful. And but I started waking up most mornings thinking that God wasn't finished with me, that there was something that I was supposed to do that I hadn't done. There was some kind of a breakthrough that was out there for me, and now that was there, and then the love of my life, my wife left me for a lawyer, and I spent 3 years in what one of my friends described as the divorce from hell. And even that horrible experience, with the price that I paid, and most of all, the price that my children paid, I learned so much about me. And I refocused my life. I went back to work. Um, the amount of money that all of that cost me was motivation to go back to work, quite frankly.
yeah.
That day, that was a painful day. Anybody that tells you, like these executives that leave their company and lose the use of the corporate jet, anybody tells you they don't miss it, they're lying.
I'll
I
write
had
that
been
down.
I had gotten so spoiled. But I think anything that wakes us up is useful. You mentioned your son confronted you about your travel time,
Mhm.
being away from much. For me, it was that divorce. I learned so much about me. I was a victim for about 3 months. Then I got confronted by one of my own trainers that I wasn't living what I teach.
Yeah.
I was being the victim of all this horrible stuff that was happening. Uh, but I made a promise then, and actually, John Denver and I went through our divorces at the same time. Our wives were and continue to be best friends, and they coordinated this. They left us in the same week, so we went through a lot of this stuff together. And one of the things that we did was when John would get off the road, he usually was just exhausted.
Mm.
I mean, he loved singing and loved being in front of people, but I found out I traveled with him for 6 months. That's an exhausting deal, city
Yeah.
after city after city. And we would often go down valley from Aspen. There's a little town called Glenwood Springs, and it has hot springs. And there's something called the Vapor Caves. So you can go down and sit in this natural cave that they've carved out some benches inside and cook. You basically cook, and sweat and talk. And then you go out and have a shower and maybe a massage, and then you come back and cook some more, and then you have your macrobiotic lunch, very healthy kind of day. And we talked a lot. We made some promises to each other. And one of them was that we would, to the best of our ability, live a life of no regrets from that moment on. And that we would make choices more consciously and in service to the vision that we had for our lives, our families' lives, and for the world. And I have mostly kept that promise, and John, until he died, kept that promise. And we made better choices, but it it came out of a disaster. It came out of a shock. And I've seen so many people's lives change because of the birth of a child, a positive shock, or a divorce, a negative shock. And even those words, positive and negative, they're loaded. They're belief oriented. A shock is a shock. It doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative. And I've seen people change their lives about getting fired or laid off, or their boss changes from somebody that was nurturing and kind and inspiring to somebody that just wasn't. That kind. I think you got to listen to that kind of stuff, and then find a coach, go do a seminar, read several books, read my book. My daughter now accuses me of just being a book salesman. But,
please tell us what it is.
The name is Living an Extraordinary Life. It's now a bestseller. It's available on Amazon. If you want a signed copy, go on my website, therobertwhite.com, and buy it there. And I'll sign it to you and send it to you. But and I do this weekly email called An Extraordinary Minute. It's designed to be read in 1 minute or less. Something positive, something to make you think, because it made me think. And but there's a lot of resources out there, and plug yourself into some new attitudes, some new habits, some new behaviors, even, and just start noticing what's happening, what's becoming more clear to you.
Yeah. I love that you said, because I know you hear a lot of stories about, and you just described one, and I sort of just described one where almost like the shock needs to be negative, like, oh, well, he lost everything, or, this really unfortunate thing happened, and that's what propelled him or her to success. And I'm glad that you verified that it can absolutely be a positive shock, like getting married or the birth of a child, or so many other. You have to acknowledge and recognize those things as well. Not everybody gets beat into the ground to be successful. I don't want. That's not the message we're spreading. Is that you have to go through trauma to make a breakthrough. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have clients that got promotions that they didn't expect. And they get into the it's even labeled now by the psychologist, imposter syndrome. I hope they don't find out I'm not really qualified for this, and that's all belief on previous failures or previous self-doubt, and you bring it into this new job. They gave you the new job because they believed in you. They saw something in you that maybe you don't see in you, but that's a positive shock. And what people do then is they go to the wrong place in terms of interpreting it. Instead of interpreting it as, wow, they saw the gift in me. They saw my potential. This is great. Well, there's another way to do exactly the same situation is to go to the imposter. I don't deserve this. I hope you don't find out about me. And so it's all about these choices we make that are, in fact, belief-based. Unless you do the work to clear the past and complete it, it's pretty hard to go into the future.
I've had multiple people say that, and I believe this because I was the same way. I truly believed I didn't deserve it. I wasn't worthy. I still probably to this day have to watch that, right? I have to watch that. Like, am I big enough for this, right? Why do you think that is, number one? And then number two, like, how do we break out of that program or that download or that belief system? Because I really think that's what it is.
It is. And a lot of it does come from childhood. Yeah. The research says that by the time we are 10 years old, we've heard the word no or some kind of a negative word 18,000 times. 18,000 times. So we are programmed from birth to the opposite of possibility, the opposite of positive. And that's what I grew up in. I grew up in it with an angry, critical, violent mother and a silent father. And I can remember the angle of the sun coming through the window At 17 years old, uh, uh, my father died when I was 1 week past my 15th birthday. And my mother and my family moved back to the South, and I stayed in Green Bay with another family. And but at 17 years old, I had just completed a year where I made more money than my father had ever made. I was a DJ on a local radio station. I had the highest rated show in the state of Wisconsin, and I got paid a lot of money. In addition to that, I graduated sixth out of 300 graduates in high school, and I was named most likely to succeed. So I telephoned my mother to brag a little. And the first words out of her mouth were, "Why weren't you number one?" You know, but that wasn't the first time that happened. That happened when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, where I was told, "You're too big for your britches. You're not as smart as you think you are. You're not going to amount to anything." That kind of stuff is present in all of us. We hear things as an undeveloped, I mean, there's a ton of brain research now. We hear things we don't remember, but they're in us, and in a subconscious way, an unconscious way. So you need to clear that stuff and take the negative energy off it. And on a practical basis, I know we're getting close to the end here, Brian. On a practical basis, quite often the complaint is, "Well, I've got this overhead now at this point in my life." You know, you did it through investing in real estate and then got more interested in that. But, you know, you can pick up little part-time activities that prepare you to support yourself while you're pursuing your dreams. And in a practical sense, I do think that's important. And also that has that tendency of busting up that any negative belief system you have about yourself. Hey, I can survive. I can do this. Because that's what you've got to get to make that kind of shift.
I agree 100%. And just the vulnerability, I appreciate it, Robert. It's important for the audience to hear. I think the lesson there is, yeah, what you said something, it's present in all of us, like that type of stuff. And it's not necessarily that maybe our parents were trying to, knock us down. It's just sometimes you don't even realize what's coming out of your mouth. So I always watch what I say to my kid, and I've said some stuff to him that I've regretted and I've had to repair and apologize for, but other people have helped me with that. Right. So I think the lesson here is to, acknowledge that, you're going to make these mistakes, but I think the repair part is super, super important. And like you said, you got to let go of that because you're talking about it now, something that happened when you were 15 years old or younger. So we need to acknowledge and deal with it and get the support that we need so that we can have that breakthrough. Robert, really great stuff. Can you give us I'll leave all the links in the show notes that you mentioned, but can you give us the website again to where we can grab that resource, the daily email thing? That sounds super cool. I think everyone should grab that for sure. It's
therobertwhite.com. Somebody, of course, captured robertwhite.com a long time ago, but yeah. So I added and for me, by the way, I built 3 companies with 1,300,000 graduates and nobody knew who I was because I did it all from behind the scenes and it didn't have my name on it. I didn't do the Tony Robbins thing or Dale Carnegie or, these people that put their name on stuff, Stephen Covey. I hid behind the background, and it would require a couch and a therapist to fully explain that. But part of my learning from my coach is this website. It has my name on it, therobertwhite.com. And if you sign up for the weekly e-zine, which is free, it comes every Wednesday morning, and you'll also receive a 28-page PDF. It's basically an essay on success, and with a couple of little exercises in it for you to do to kind of look where you are and where you want to go. So, and it's shareable. You can share it with family or friends or colleagues easily. So a lot of people have said that it was meaningful in their life. And of course, you can buy my book. And if Megan is listening anywhere, see Megan, I did it again. I'm selling the book.
Megan will be very happy. Appreciate the generosity there with the essay. That's something I'm absolutely going to grab. I would encourage all of you to do the same. Robert, this has been tremendous. Again, sharing your insight and your experience and great stories. I love I love a good story. You tie the lesson into the story, which is always great. So you're really good at that. Before we wrap up, anything that might be sitting with you that I either didn't ask you, or any final thoughts that you want to share?
Look, I think it's all about relationships. I'm talking about myself here. I have a new friend in Brian O'Neill, and so if nothing else happens out of this, I know we're simpatico. We're aligned on a lot of things, and that's what I look for. I'm looking for deeper and relationships, and so if you're listening to this and you kind of have a hankering for looking at you more carefully, take advantage of the free stuff. Buy the book; it's $20 or plus shipping, and get out there and try some new things. Read a new book. Go to a seminar. Get a coach. That's a big thing. Maybe the most efficient and powerful is to find somebody that's going to confront your story. And look, well, this thing only goes around once, so choose wisely.
Absolutely. What are we waiting for? We only got one shot. That's a great way to end it. Thanks again, Robert. Everyone, make it a great day.